Hi everybody, I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today I'm going to do something a little different than usual. I'm going to talk about a role-playing game supplement, or actually a bunch of supplements, but they're not books. They are the card decks. Modiphius, for several of its 2d20 game lines, produces card decks that are designed to help you during play. And rather than try to do one review for each, which I think would take, you know, they'd all be too short and it would just not be very much content, I'm going to talk about several of them. Right now we're going to look at 2 decks for John Carter and then 4 decks for Infinity. Okay? So we'll start with the one that's in the graphic up there, the John Carter Landscape Art Location deck. These are much larger. A regular deck of cards looks like this. This is significantly larger, you can see. Anyway, so let's open it up so you can see what is inside. I really do love this particular deck. Basically, it is full, full width, widescreen, no border art cards showing, really beautiful art. About the world of Barsoom and the world of John Carter. The backs of the cards have descriptions of the location on there. So here is a cool picture of the Valley Door, and then on the back there's a little verbal description of the Valley Door. Excuse me. So the reason that I think this deck in particular is so useful and so valuable is because not everybody knows what the world of Barsoom looks like, right? This is an early 20th century writer making up their own version of Mars. And so it's a world we've never been to, and it's a world that's very different from what we're used to. You get into a D&D or a Pathfinder game, and even some of the more esoteric settings, we kind of understand what it looks like, right? You use, D&D Ravnica, and it's a big city. It's a big kind of Eastern European city, full of monsters and stuff. And yes, we have to use our imaginations to know exactly what that is, but we've all been in a city before, or we've been through an enchanted forest before. Like, those are kinds of things that images readily come to mind when you start describing them to players. And so when John Carter came out, one of the things I noticed very quickly was that not everyone has read every single John Carter book the way some of us have. And I think a lot of the early adopters were people like me, who were the hardcore John Carter, Edgar Rice Burroughs fans, who have read all the books and have seen all the Michael Whelan book covers and all this incredible stuff. But more likely than not, many or all of the people you're playing with don't have that background. And so being able to pull this out and say, well, here you go. There's 6-legged lions. This is what they look like. Or, here's some other nasty creatures. Trying to describe, for example, one of these big, giant apes that have tusks and have multifaceted compound eyes like an insect. Also, you can see in here, this is what people wear. They don't really wear clothes on Barsoom. They wear leather and straps, basically. What do these locations look like? What do the people look like? You need to describe some Tharks in the ruins of an ancient city, and at some point playing John Carter, you're going to have to describe Tharks in the ruin of an ancient city. They're everywhere. Here is a great picture. And so there's all of these wonderful things that can help your characters, help your players to immediately know what kind of environment they're in. Okay? So that your ability to pull this out and say, well, what are we fighting? Or where are we fighting? And say, well, you're fighting here. Look, this is what it looks like. This is what you look like. Or you're riding on the back of a giant bird. What does the giant bird look like? How are we dressed? Some of the, they're really great. I love that they're large size. You can use these, you can draw them randomly to create an adventure. If you don't know where to set something, you can just shuffle your deck and go, oh, okay, we're going to be in the mountains of Torkas. And then you know what it looks like and you know how to describe it to your players. Anyway, it's a really useful thing. Now, companion to that deck is this other deck that I held up before. This is the character and token card deck, also for John Carter. This is similarly valuable for its ability to depict an unfamiliar world, right? So, what do people wear? Well, there's Deja Thoris. That's what people wear on Barsoom. There's John Carter. That's what people wear on Barsoom, right? And if they've looked through the book, they probably know some of this stuff already, but it doesn't hurt to have these images. There are just a ton of cards here, and some of them are for very specific people, like, Deja Thoris and John Carter. In fact, I think all of them are for specific people, but a lot of these are just kind of very generic. We need to have, the men who live in the north and have this kind of very golden yellow skin. And they fight with hooked swords. What does that look like? Well, now you know what that looks like. And so when your players go there, you can show that to them. So anyway, and here's Woola. Yay for Woola, the Callet. What does a Callet look like? It looks like that. So I like these things a lot. I think that they are useful. I take slight issue with some of the features of this deck, though. I don't love the character deck as much as I love the location deck, in large part because after a certain point, they are all kind of the same stuff, right? Like, how many pictures of a man of Mars do we need to see to know, okay, people on Mars have red skin and they wear leather? Like, okay. And there are many cards in here that all look essentially the same. They're still great and they're still useful. What I guess my larger complaint with this is, first of all, there's no stats on these cards at all. And it would have been so easy, especially because the John Carter RPG is so minimalist, it would have been really easy to throw some stats on there so that you could say, who are we fighting today? Well, you're fighting this thing, and here's what its numbers are, right? Now, in the back of the deck, they do have 3 cards that include a lot of stats. These are incredibly valuable, especially if you don't have the Game Shield, the GM screen. So you have, for example, an assassin. Let's see. An assassin, a benevolent leader. This is not really coming into focus. There we go. A corrupt warlord, a duelist. And you just have your 6 attributes and an ability, maybe 2 abilities. And then at the on one of the cards, they have some race adjustments. So if you come from Earth, come on, camera, focus in. Show us the money. Anyway, if you come from Earth, or if you are a green Martian or a red Martian or whatever, then you're going to have slightly different stats, right? And so you can construct the stats you need really easily. I just don't understand why they weren't thrown on here, because the stats for any given character in the John Carter system are so simple. Also, maybe this is a lot more valuable to some people than others. The backs of the cards are designed as tokens. The D20 system, the 2D20 system from Modiphius, has you tracking 3 different kinds of currency, which is called momentum and threat and determination. I'm pretty sure. They give them slightly different names in every one, and I can't remember exactly what they're called for this. I bet it says on the box. Threat, momentum, and luck. Okay, not determination. And so, yes, they've got 3 different card backs. Those don't look super different, but they are. And that are designed to be used as tokens to track these currencies. And yes, that is a valuable thing. And there are absolutely play groups that are going to be really grateful to have these cards and say, okay, I have this many momentum, and it's really cool. I mean, these are nice cards. They're about, the strength and material of, say, a Magic card or any other kind of collectible game card. And it's pretty art. But here, I'm going to ask you to compare that to the next deck we're going to look at, which is the Adversary deck from Infinity. Now, same publisher, same game system, 2d20 and everything. Also, essentially the same purpose, right? These are characters. So, the difference is these characters are loaded with stats, okay? Here's the guy's, big picture of him. Here's some information about him. Here's a little description of him. On the back is a full character sheet with all of the stats, all of the powers, all of the gear. There's even plot hooks up here at the top. And so, yes, I think it's really useful to have this, and there are certainly some things you can do with this. This is not a waste of money or space. It is a good thing to have in your collection. But compared to the Infinity cards, there's no comparison. The Infinity cards are 1,000 times better. So, well, I definitely recommend people pick up, if you're going to play John Carter, pick up these landscape cards because you're going to be referencing them constantly. I don't know if I give the same recommendation to the character cards, just because of all the missed potential. They're okay for what they are. They could have been so much better. Anyway, let's talk now about these Infinity cards in a little more detail. These are wonderful. Okay? I really love everything about this. So, we've got the characters up here at the top. Again, I don't know if I can get the camera to focus correctly, but it gives you a name, and then it gives you a personality. Okay, so let's look at this one. This one's name is Chiemi Teshuhori. She is authoritative and professional. She drives a hard bargain. So right away, you as the GM know not only who this character is and what they look like, but how to role play them. And then down here at the bottom it says, control of supply and demand are two things Chiemi learned to monopolize from an early age. She can source items that most might consider of questionable legality. And so, whereas, someone like this, you don't necessarily know, well, Deja Thoris is a terrible example because you know exactly how she'll fit into your game. She's the ruler of the world. Someone like this, you're looking for a black market merchant or any kind of merchant. We need someone we can throw in there. Well, okay, you've got one. Then on the back, we've got a plot hook that says, requires leverage on a local political figure in exchange for her assistance. You don't have to use that, but you can if you want. Then you've got all your attributes, you've got all of your things, you've got some key skills that she's good at. You have her attack information if you get into a fight with her. What gear is she wearing? What talents does she have? And then down at the bottom, a little icon showing her factional affiliation. Ooh, hey, it focused. There we go. You can see all of that great stuff. This deck of how many cards are in this deck? 54 portraits of characters. Okay? It includes just phenomenal character art. Some of it very anime in style. Some of it very kind of sneaky cyberpunk looking. And some of it kind of more basic robot warrior armored kind of stuff. And it has people from every faction. It shows the wide variety of people, of faces, of ethnicity and diversity. It has some that are really good, that are recognizable from the minis game. This guy right here on the side, there's a mini of him, and also shows off, I don't know, just these are wonderful cards. It's hard to imagine playing this game without access to these cards, because if you need to throw a character into your game, then you can. And let's see. Anyway, they're not going to show it. Just really wonderful character art. Just so many characters. I mean, to an extent, if you wanted to, there's so much information on these cards that if you needed to do a filler scenario, say you were playing a different game or you go to a convention and for whatever reason you have to throw together a scenario just, overnight in 5 minutes. Well, here's your character sheets. This is everything a character needs to know, everything a player needs to know to play a character. And so you can do, you could actually run an entire session just shuffling this deck, dealing each person a card and saying, here's your character. Take 5 minutes, figure out who they are, how you're going to play them, and then we start our game and go. I cannot say enough good things about this adversary deck for Infinity. Let's look, though, at some other decks. We've got a couple of other decks. So just like John Carter, Infinity has location decks. These are not as big as the John Carter location cards, but they're still really cool. So these, in keeping with the utility of the Infinity character cards, these are very useful. They've got a great evocative art on one side, but then on the back they've got more information. Okay, so instead of just purely descriptive information, they have things that can happen. So for example, if you get into one of the things that's always hard as a GM in any 2D20 game is coming up with good ways to spend heat. That's like the evil version of the currency that the GM can use. And so here, if you get into a psi war, which is like you're trying to persuade people, you're trying to influence opinions, there's a special ability in the Den of Iniquity called Not How It Looks. You spend 2 heat, and then a PC is identified as a patron of the establishment, providing material suitable for extortion and psi war attacks. Or if you get into a physical fight, warfare, there's a 3 heat power on here that says a PC becomes potentially addicted to the services on offer. Target must pass a willpower test or suffer a metanoia effect, blah, blah, blah. So, there you go. And then down at the bottom, you can see that tiny little thing in the colored box, Tungusian Cyber Dungeon, Acontecimiento Sensa Suite, U.S. Ariadnan Frontier Brothel. So, this doesn't necessarily have to be any one of those. These are just example ideas. So how about this? An antenna relay. For whatever reason, your characters need to go to an antenna relay and do something to it. Well, on the back, that little box at the bottom says it's an Arachne relay or an alien communication station or an Ariadna observation tower. And then it's got some InfoWar and Warfare powers. So, just like the John Carter one, but again, with slightly more information and a little more utility. Let's keep going because it gets even better. How about this? This is a deck called the GM Plot Deck. And the GM Plot Deck is kind of like a big, deck of cards, each one of which is an adventure scenario. So this one says Murder on the Circular Express, and it has incredible art of some kind of cool cyberpunk train. Okay? Then on the back, it's got a whole scenario. It's got a title, and up there at the top, come on, focus on the card. Whoa! An important diplomat or politician from a multi-faction crisis team was murdered. Evidence points to an opposing faction. Find a swift and discreet resolution before a crisis engulfs the human sphere. And so there's your setup for the scenario. There's description. What is the location like? What kind of twists might happen over the course of this scenario? What kind of obstacles will the players have to face? What kind of adversaries will they have to face? And what is their objective, main and secondary? Okay? And then there's like 50-something cards all like this. This is so valuable. Again, you could, with this deck and the adversary deck, you could roll into a convention, deal everybody a card, draw a random thing out of this and say, oh, okay, political mire. A radical group masquerading as lobbyists have taken hostage. You don't read this out loud to your players. You read it to yourself. Has taken hostages inside a well-known political institution, though their intent remains unclear. Okay, well then you know what your characters need to do, you know how they need to do it, and they're going to go in there and do it. if you already are using the Infinity Adventure supplements, or if you've already created a campaign, you might not need this. This particular deck is so specific to itself that not every campaign is going to find a lot of utility in it. But I just think it's so amazing to be able to say, okay, I don't know what my players are going to do today. How about a corporate retreat? And then on the back, there's this entire thing. The amount of information that they have crammed onto these Infinity cards is phenomenal to me. And I say crammed, lovingly placed. It's incredibly easy to parse this information. Now, last deck. One of my favorite aspects of the Infinity game is called the Wilderness of Mirrors. It's a cyberpunky, spy-ish kind of game where several of the players might be working against each other. You have your main objective as a party. We need to get into this political building and save these hostages from these terrorists, right? But one or two of the players might also have something else going on. What other thing do they have going on? Here's an entire deck full of other things they have going on. This is 54 cards, and every card has a full Wilderness of Mirrors objective for every single faction. Okay? So let's say you've got one of your characters, and we're going to do that political mire adventure card that we looked at. Terrorists are holding some important people in a political building of some kind. You've got to go in and get them out. Okay? But one of your people is, let's say, a nomad. Okay? So I draw this card. Nomad is this little red and black one with a triangle-y symbol on it. It says, smear a designated target as a mole for a rival faction. Obtain or plant evidence as necessary. So now that person knows. You as the GM, just really quick, you say, okay, well, one of the politicians that's being held, you're going to go in and you're going to rescue them, absolutely. But in the process, this agent has been asked to make that politician look like a traitor. And this is your perfect opportunity to go in and rescue the people and do everything, but also plant some evidence, make them look like they work for the wrong party, and totally screw that politician's life. Okay? So the rest of the party is all trying to do one thing, but you've got this Wilderness of Mirrors scenario doing something else. Let's say that you want to give somebody something else. So here, at random, we're going to pull this one. Okay? Boop. And let's say it's a Pan-Oceania character. A local organization is suspected of sympathizing with Libertos and providing them with supplies. Investigate and report. Okay, so Libertos is a specific organization that Pano is worried about. You could decide that these terrorists are Libertos, and you're trying to figure out who their outside contacts are that enabled this particular attack. And not everyone in the party is necessarily trying to do that, but now you've got one person who is. And maybe you have both of those. The Nomad and the Pano operative are both trying to help the group while also do their own private thing. It can add a lot of complication to an Infinity game to use the Wilderness of Mirrors. But it can also add a lot of really cool depth and a lot of really cool kind of distrust. And it can also add focus. Because if you just say, okay, guys, there's some terrorists, go in there and solve the problem, then the player characters might not know what to do. But if one of them that you've given a little card to suddenly knows, oh, well, I need to plant some evidence while I'm in there, that gives them all of a sudden some direction and some ideas about, well, I think maybe the best way to save these terrorists, I think there's an access point near the server room, or something like that. That's going to say, okay, we're going to go in there, but in a way that helps me do my thing. And the others, maybe they are suspicious, maybe they're not, depends on how your player plays it. Anyway, the Wilderness of Mirrors, in my opinion, adds a lot of really cool texture to a scenario, and it can be difficult to come up with good Wilderness of Mirrors ideas. Not anymore. There's 7 ideas on each of 54 cards. You will never run out of really cool Wilderness of Mirrors scenario ideas. So anyway, that's it. That's 6 decks I wanted to show you. 2 for John Carter and 4 for Infinity. I think that the Infinity decks across the board are better designed than the John Carter ones. They are packed with information. They're valuable. They're really pretty to look at. The art on them is incredible. And they just have so much game information. They have stats. They have role-playing tips. They have adventure hooks. They have all kinds of stuff. The John Carter decks, while not as information-rich, are still going to be valuable to you. In particular, that landscape deck, simply because Barsoom is a weird place. And so being able to pull it out and show your characters, here's this cool cyberpunk train you have to save somebody from. Or here's this cool Martian canyon that you have to go into and rescue somebody. Here's this amazing, nighttime city. I mean, the art is gorgeous. We can't deny that. That's what it looks like. You come upon it. And now you have to decide what you're going to do next. There's just so much that you can do with it. The one and only deck that I'm a little disappointed in is this John Carter character deck, just because of how much more information the cards could have, but don't, because they wanted to make it into a token deck. It could have been as amazing as these Infinity character cards, and they're not. They're still kind of neat, though, and they do function really well as currency cards to help you track momentum and threat and luck. So, anyway, that's the review. I really enjoy these decks. I like what they bring to a game. I am looking forward to more games starting to incorporate card decks because of the cool stuff you can do with them, and because of how easy they are to transport and carry around. So anyway, that's it. The card decks are wonderful. If you play John Carter or Infinity, definitely check them out. I think that you are going to find some really invaluable stuff that you will like for a long time to come. Anyway, my name's Dan Wells. You are awesome, and I will see you on my next review.